So, okay. Anyway, Jen, Lucas, sorry. Hey, hi. Jen and I met, we were just talking about it. We think we were in the Tara Swiger's Starship at the same time. But I think the first time we really started talking to each other was rocking around the National Needle Arts Association convention thing, trade show, which was so much fun. It's fun to do because you walk around and you meet a lot of people and get to talk to a lot of people, which is a lot of fun. Yeah. So at that time, you were in a group, Jen, with a group called Stitch Sprouts. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me about Stitch Sprouts and kind of how that works?
Yes. So Stitch Sprouts is a company that's run by Heather Zapetti. She is also a knitwear designer. And she has some yarn that is her yarn for, it's Stitch Sprouts brand yarn. She also sells notions, stitch markers, things like that. And then what she also does is that she wholesales our patterns to local yarn stores. So she has about 30 or so, it's kind of give or take, designers that are in the group. And basically it's an easy way for yarn stores to be able to order print patterns. I mean, I do feel like in our industry now, print patterns are, at yarn stores are not nearly as popular as they used to be, just with Ravelry and being able to get things online. Mm-hmm. But she wanted to create a way that, a yarn store could call one person and get print patterns for 30 designers, and so 30 designers was sort of what Heather felt like she could handle in terms of like volume of patterns. Mm-hmm. So it's local yarn stores that will call and work with her. There's a few different like kit clubs and stuff, like different, like, that are just like online that sometimes will order patterns from her. But and it was just going, again, I mean, going to TNNA and meeting her a couple times, then I got hooked up with that group. So yeah, it's been great because it really does help, us as designers. It's really helped, I think, with like being able to teach at yarn stores and stuff, where people know who you kind of know who you are. You're not, you're kind of standing out a little more than maybe there's so many great designers online. It's really hard to stand out. So it's really helped with my teaching and stuff like that.
So, I think it's fun. You guys had sort of a cadre of people at TNNA. You were all together on one aisle, so it was really a nice show of kind of one-stop shopping kind of thing.
Yes, and what was nice about that was, towards the end of the last few shows at TNNA, it was easier for designers to get space to showcase, to have a booth, that they purchased from TNNA. But for a long time, that wasn't the case. And so unless you like became a wholesaler yourself, you couldn't have a booth on the floor at TNNA. And so it made it very hard for us to get in front of the yarn stores to talk to them. So what was really great about Stitch Sprouts was that if I wanted a booth, which I did do a booth with her a couple times, I would just pay Stitch Sprouts for whatever portion of the booth. Like if I wanted one booth or two booths or whatever. And so all of us were under the umbrella of Stitch Sprouts, but Heather was allowing us to just we just paid her, and then that was our booth space as a way to get in front of the yarn stores. Because again, like those trade shows, it is hard, the designers, when we didn't have space, I want to talk to the yarn stores. I want to go teach there. I want them, in my case, I have books. I want them to carry my books, but it was really hard for a long time for us to be able to get in front of the actual yarn stores. So it was great that Heather really found a solution to that for us.
So you're saying you were talking about the change between a printed pattern and now an online pattern. Have you seen not as many sales to yarn shops, or are they buying them through Ravelry? I mean, how does the whole digital world affecting the sale of patterns?
Yeah, so the majority of my individual sort of self-published catalog, still the majority of my patterns are being purchased on Ravelry directly. The knitter is buying them directly. I would say after that, it would be the yarn stores using the local yarn store program that's on Ravelry, where they can, you know, whatever, I forget what it's called, but they can, you know, they can purchase it and, you know, pay me at the end of the month. And then third would be Stitch Sprout. So I think even the yarn stores really are going to sort of that digital model where they can just get what they need at that moment versus having, you know, to buy a few at a time and then have that inventory. So, but yeah, the majority is just people, you know, just clicking around and then buying them, you know.
Well, you have such beautiful, beautiful, beautiful patterns that it would be easy to find them. Do you want to talk a little about your design process? I mean, how do you start with the yarn first? Do you start with an idea first? How does that work?
So for me, it really does kind of depend on the particular project. So for example, like if I'm gonna self-publish a shawl pattern, I do basically all accessories, so mostly it's shawls. So if I'm gonna design a shawl pattern that's gonna be self-published, it'll usually either start with the particular yarn I want to use, or if there's a stitch pattern that I want to use or something like that. And then, like, so if I have the yarn, then I might, you know, go to my stitch dictionaries and figure out what I want to do, or I'll look at the yarn and kind of decide what shape of shawl I want and then go to my stitch dictionaries. So that's sort of the way I work. I actually finished it's like not blocked or anything, but I finished a self-published shawl and then I brought it over here so I could like show you all my papers and everything. If you want.
Good. Oh, good. Let's look at that.
This yarn I had received from Leading Men Fiber Arts, and they wanted a shawl that was in the colors of like the Chicago city flag, has like these two kind of colors in white. And so they just wanted a shawl that used these two colors. So they're just like, whatever, just do whatever you want, but please use these two. So it's kind of one of these, you know, on the bias sideways that are very popular right now. And so pretty much I knew I wanted stripes, and I knew I wanted like this garter eyelet thing and then some just easy lace. And so like what I did was, see, I have this is how I work this. So I started out with a piece of graph paper, just kind of writing down, like, sometimes I have a hard time visualizing, like when it comes to stripes, like how to make them flow, like make it, you know, like especially when you're trying to make pattern repeats, you know. Kind of made some notes here, and then I actually go straight to writing my entire pattern out. And then you can see, like,
wait, hold on. Before a swatch?
I mean, okay, so when it comes to shawls, I don't often swatch.
Okay.
I, most of the time, just start my shawl, and if I don't like it, I take it out. I knit a lot of shawls in the same weights of yarn. And so I kind of know gauge-wise where I'm at. I kind of know, okay, if I have this much yarn, I use this needle size. This is about how big this shape of shawl is going to be. So I pretty much go just straight into knitting the shawl. I think over time, I can visualize it, a lot of it in my head. So
I am poking fun because everybody says you have to start with a swatch, so I'm poking.
I mean, on some things, yes, but
okay, I'm with you.
Like if it's a sock, sometimes a finger. There's other things where I will do swatches. Shawls, I just usually don't. But then I just go ahead and I write out my entire pattern. Like you can see here where I have it kind of highlighted. This is like what I have to put the final gauge in, because obviously I don't know because I didn't make a swatch yet. I was just gonna have to measure it. And then if I have, like, here I found a little mistake, so I just write it in pencil. But then I just go straight, I make my chart and write it all out, and there you go. So
you start the shawl.
Yeah.
You write it up, and then as you're knitting it, you write corrections as you're knitting the sample, you write the corrections on the pattern.
Yes. And so, yes. So I will, I will write it out directly. Like I'll write my changes on my pattern. And then when I'm done, I'll go back and fix it all up. And that's pretty much how it works.
Cool. Okay. So how will you block that now?
How will I block this? So I have some of those blocking wires, like the really long, there's like super long flexible blocking wires. So a lot of times what I'll do is like the finished bind off edge, I'll just put the wire through the finished edge and then pull it out that way and then just kind of pin it, you know. And
wet block? This is a wet block?
This is a wet block, yes, it will be a wet block, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now your pattern is pretty much, your sample is done, a sample is done, your pattern is pretty much written and corrected out, and you correct it obviously in your file. Now, do you send that out to a tech editor? Do you send it out to another sample knitter? Do you send it out to test knitters? How do you go from there?
From there, I go to a tech editor. I'll say who I'm using. I for the most part use Kitty Wonder. She's very good, and her and her partner do crochet too, if you need a crochet editor. So I send my pattern to her and she tech edits it. I have a tendency to not use test knitters unless it's something that I haven't really done before. Like if it's a shawl shape or some kind of technique that I haven't done before, then I want a test knitter to sort of make sure that it makes sense to do it.
Yeah.
But if it's just like a shawl like this, I've already designed a whole bunch of them. I'm confident that my pattern will work. I just need the tech editor to make sure that like everything is correct. You know, and I think now, like these days in the industry, I think there's also sort of like there's test knitters, but there's also what I kind of think of as preview knitters. Yes. So
that's interesting. Yeah.
So some designers will call it like they want test knitters, but really what they want is when they release the pattern, just to have a bunch of projects already out there, which is great. It's like perfect. Then everybody can see all these different, you know,
versions,
different colors, yarns, everything else. You know, I never am planning ahead enough for that. So, but like somebody who does a really great job of that is Lisa of Paper Daisy Creations. And I do think that there's some test knitting involved in that, but she gets a lot of test knitters on her sock patterns. And so when she releases a pattern, there's already bunches of people that have already made this beautiful sock. And I do think that that like really helps with her sales. And even though they are probably doing like some test knitting, I do think of like when you have a large number of like that, it's more like preview knitters that like,
that makes more sense.
Making it ahead of time.
So that gets done, but you've got to take pictures now. Do you have a set photo shoot? Do you have a photographer? Does your husband shoot the pictures? Do you have,
my husband does not shoot the pictures because there's too much arguing when there's
okay.
I'm like, well, can't you look at all these beautiful examples on the internet of what I want, and why can't you do that? You know? So I mean, sometimes he is helpful. Like there are some times when he does a great job when I need him to, but for the most part, I just handle it myself. So I take most of my pictures on my dress form just out in my driveway with my iPhone.
And they look gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
They absolutely look gorgeous. Frances, I think we'll probably go next to look at the patterns. So if you want to give me the wand of power, because we've been talking about all these patterns. And how about talk to me about the one, we're gonna get to it on the big picture, but the Booth Bay behind you is so lovely.
So this one I created with Dun Roving Yarns, who's in Maine actually. And so she had these like mini skeins, and those are like the orange to the red. So she had like a set of 6 or 7 of the mini skeins, and then she wanted to give me like one skein of this. I think it was 50 grams of this dark blue, and she just asked that I make something in just sort of like a wrap like this.
It's brilliant.
To be honest, when she first sent the color, and I should just know just to trust her, because right, the yarn dyers are the experts. When she first sent the colors, I was like, I don't know, like it wasn't a color combination that I necessarily would have thought of, but oh my gosh, after I knit it, I was like obsessed. It's so pretty.
It
So
really is gorgeous.
yeah, it's just a really easy, like little acorn sort of lace kind of stitch
Mm-hmm.
and some garter stitch. Very easy.
That's just gorgeous. Let me see whether I have got the power now, and we'll go through the, give me just a second.
Okay.
And we do that, and we go down here and we hit this. Thank you, Francis, incidentally. Share. And any second now, it's going to open in Zoom. Okay, there we go.
Okay, great.
Yes, there we go. Okay. You want to talk to us about this one?
Yeah, this one is dispersion. So I did a little collection, I don't know, I guess it was last year, of 3 shawls that were just like, had like I like to buy a lot of yarn that's just like rainbow looking. And so I had these mini skeins from Sweet Georgia, and I had an idea in my head for a while that I wanted to do a half pie shawl where like the increases would be like a different color. Mm-hmm. So what I did here was I added the increases in and then had the little stripes of the different colors. But then with the pie shawl, how the math works, when you get further down, you don't need to, you know, do your increases as frequently. So then it's just like regular, just sort of like yarn over knit 2 togethers, just to sort of give you the same look while not increasing your shawl. I really like it.
It's so pretty. I like that one. And just so I told you earlier, these are just ones that I happen to like. So you have so many to choose from.
Yeah. And
so,
and I think that with dispersion, what's like just interesting is that I do write out my patterns a lot of the time, like I said, but with dispersion, I like specifically remember. I was knitting it, I think, last summer at TNNA. And I got to the border, and whatever I had written down on my piece of paper, I was like, it just wasn't going to work. And so that border was me just sitting with a piece of graph paper, just like, I knew I kind of wanted some sort of like feather and fan chevron kind of thing. And I just drew something on a piece of graph paper at TNNA and started knitting it. And I was like, oh, it looks good. So, you know, even though I do write out my patterns most of the time, it's like sometimes you just gotta, you know, kind of just go with the flow.
Go with the flow. Yeah. All right, and this next one is not really a shawl, if I understand. This is more like a large cowl bandana thing.
Yeah, I don't think I have that one right here. No. Oh wait, yes I do. It's right here. So that's Gallica, and so this is what I call a cowlette.
Okay.
So basically, it starts out as a triangle shawl worked back and forth in rows, and then you join in the round in the back, and then you keep then knitting in the round like it's the same shape as a triangle shawl. You just then start knitting in the round. But what's great is those, especially the small like triangle shawls, like for my body type, they're too small. What I like about this is it just fits right over your head. You still kind of I love wearing the triangle shawls to the front. So it gives you the look of the triangle shawl, but it's a cowl, and then so it won't fall off.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And then you, as you said, you could pull it back over your shoulders too, which is really kind of nice.
Exactly. So yeah, that's really
all right. Let's go. Now this one I love too, Ponderosa.
Oh yeah. So that one was, I bought that, I think I had bought that yarn at, I went to Rhinebeck one year and got the yarn from O-Wool and just knew that someday I would use it for something. And I got really into sort of like this Boothbay, the sideways wraps knit on the bias. And so I kind of played around with that. And I knew that I love knitting garter stitch and I love knitting lace. So you can see it's like incorporated into a lot of my designs. So that one I just love because it kind of has the lace at the beginning and the end, but then it just has some easy garter stitch in the middle.
I just love the way that drapes. That's so nice. And you can tell I'm not a shawl knitter, so I'm just thrilled with all of these. The border on this thing on Sterna is just gorgeous.
Just randomly. We didn't even talk about this before. I just literally have a pile of shawls. It just happens to be like a bunch of these. So yeah, this one here is Sterna. You can see this one even. I just took that picture in my little office studio here. And this yarn also I think I got at Rhinebeck as well. And so in this particular one, I don't have it anymore, but I was running a Patreon page a couple years ago. And so I was doing exclusive patterns for the Patreon page, which is, for a designer, it is like an interesting thing to consider. It was fun doing it. And so every other month I was letting my patrons vote on what they wanted. And so this particular shawl was born out of, they wanted a top-down crescent shawl with a border. They wanted the shawl to be lace, the border to be lace. And so, yeah,
it's just gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah.
I just love that real wide border. That's so nice.
Yeah, I do too.
And then this one, then Booth Bay, we just talked about. So
yeah.
And this was another one from the rainbow. I feel like we're doing the rainbow collection.
Yeah, the rainbow. That's what I called it. Yep. Again, garter stitch. I just got really, especially into garter stitch. I know it's so easy, but like, I don't know. I think like last year, I just really want, like, garter stitches, like comfort knitting to me.
Yeah.
So this one I used elongated stitches.
Oh, okay.
Stitch. So it's just like makes it a little more interesting. Yeah, that one's really pretty. That yarn was so like bright too. It was such a bright rainbow. So
yeah, but it's nice. You've got the grays though to kind of calm it down. And then I am a sucker for purple and acid green. I just love this one.
Oh yeah, Savannah. So that's another one I did with Done Roving Yarns. And again, Paula sent me the yarn, and at first I was not sure. Again, it wasn't necessarily colors I would pick. That particular yarn that she has, it's one ball of yarn, and all the colors, the 4 colorways are in the ball together. And so they're joined in such a way that in theory you don't have to cut where the yarn changes. I always did cut because I was knitting shawls and I was going to aggressively block and I didn't want to take any chances.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that one it actually starts out as a top-down half pie shawl. And I transition into sort of traditional like wedge triangle shaping, but it's 3 wedges. And that one's still
so cool.
Yeah, that one's one of my older, like little bit older patterns now. It still actually is pretty popular.
I just like, as I said, I like the color combination. Yeah, and then zircon, I just love the colors and then the combinations of the 2 different types of stitches.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that one I just did for Malabrigo with their Malabrigo Quickies program. And so the person that's the coordinator of the Malabrigo Quickies program, she was the one that she wanted to send me those 2 colors of yarn, and she told me she wanted, a sideways type shawl that had, both colors in it. She didn't really care how I used them. So
yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of fun too when the yarn companies just send you something and they're like, okay, now I do what you want. So
yeah. I get those occasionally. It's fun. And then cornflower, I loved.
Yeah,
that one was just beautiful.
One of my favorites too. I did that one a couple of years ago. And that, again, it's sort of just that sideways boomerang shape, some people call it. And it's just 1 stitch pattern repeated for the whole entire thing, but I did it in a gradient yarn, and so it makes it interesting, even though it's only like a 12 or 16 row repeat. So yeah, I love that one too.
Way cool. Well, that's all I have, but that is like the tip of the iceberg of all the things that you have. So let me see if I can get out of here now. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let me see what else I have. Do you have you're so prolific. Do you have a chance where you ever get anything like what writer's block? I mean, where you just, nothing just seems to come? And if you do, how do you get out of that?
All the time. So I find, especially when I was writing my books, I would have to come up with a lot really quickly. Some of my books have 20 patterns in them. And yes, you have like, 10 to 14 months, depending, to get this whole thing together, but that's still to come up with 20. That's like 2 a week or something,
Yeah.
That's a lot. And so I would find that a lot of times especially after I would finish up writing a book, I would try to just have a month where I didn't have any other type of deadlines with any like yarn companies or whatever, anything else. And then I still would be knitting and working on other things, but just try to give myself a little bit of that break. Cause it is especially in that case, when you're trying to come up with like a lot at once, that can be a little overwhelming. And so, you know, I'm kind of at the point now where, you know, knitting was my hobby, and I'm so lucky that I was able to make it my job. But
Mm-hmm.
knitting, it's not my hobby anymore, you know. So when I do need to sort of take a break now, I read, or I like to cross stitch now. So like I do those types of things to try to
Yeah.
get the knitting juices flowing again, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I like that. How we doing? I'm gonna ask a couple more questions, and I'm gonna do lightning rounds. Will take about 30 seconds, and then we should go look at your books, because we'll do the no, I guess we'll ask questions. We'll do the questions, and then we'll look at the books, and then we'll draw. Do you let's see, we talked about that. Where do you see your knitting going?
Where do I see my knitting going?
I mean, do you you're doing shawls? Are you, sometimes people will switch over and do some other type of form of knitting, or do you, I mean, what, let's see, if you could design anything just for you, your sort of dream project.
I think right now I'm currently thinking about a skirt again. So I designed one skirt, again, done roving. They asked if I would design the skirt, and I was like, I guess I could figure that out, sure. Which I did use kind of pie shawl shaping to make the skirt, because you stick with what you know.
Yeah.
So lately I have been thinking about a skirt again. I never really thought about, honestly, wearing a skirt, like a skirt that I knit. But like lately I've been thinking about it a lot again. So I feel like currently that's where I'm at. I do, like, even though I say like knitting is not my hobby anymore, I do like to occasionally try to throw in knitting a sweater or something. As far as like designing a sweater, it's just not, I don't know, it's just not something I ever really felt like I wanted to do. I don't know. So like at this point, I don't really see myself like designing a sweater or other garments. I mean, every once in a while I'll kind of like, well, maybe, but I don't know. I love shawls so much that I just always go back.
They are so gorgeous. All right, we are about 30 minutes in, so I have a lightning round, which is just a question. Yeah, I told you about this kind of question stuff. So let's try this. What is that question for? Okay, favorite needles and why?
Oh, my favorite needles are currently the Knitter's Pride Zing needles. I am obsessed.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The Zings. So they're like aluminum, but they're really, really light, and they're pointy, but not too pointy. And I don't know, I find that every kind of yarn I use, they just are so nice to work with. And so I now have the interchangeable set. I have, you know, all the different.
I've not looked at those. I do the carbons.
Oh yeah, I like those too.
I like that company. So and they didn't pay us anything for that.
No, they didn't.
So Western or continental?
I knit English throwing. I use my right hand. Yeah.
Okay. Favorite go-to decrease?
My favorite go-to decrease. I mean, I would probably just say knit two together.
Knit two together. That's easy. That's fine. Favorite go-to increase?
My favorite go-to increase. Good old make one.
Yeah, good old make one. Or in your case, you probably would do a yarn over.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You do some socks, some small circumferences is what I'm getting to. Do you have a favorite way of doing small circumferences? DPNs, two circs, magic loop.
Magic loop.
Magic loop.
Yeah.
Okay. If you had to walk into a yarn shop and just pick a color, what would you go to? What are you drawn to?
Blue.
Blue. I kind of guessed that. Stitch markers. Favorite stitch markers.
I just like the locking clover, you know, little safety pin locking stitch markers.
Oh, okay. The ones that look like diaper pins for.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Got it. I know which ones you're talking about. Yeah. Charting program. Which charting program do you use?
I use Stitch Mastery.
Okay. Do you do mostly flat? I was going to say, because with sweater knitters, I always ask flatter in the round, but you do mostly flat. Yeah. I see. Custom knit bag or Ziploc bag?
I mean, can I say 50-50 of both?
Yes, you can. Do you do I know. Favorite start of a shawl. I mean,
garter tab. If I'm
garter
starting
tab. That's what it's good because it's the only one I know because I don't knit shawls. So, so that's cool. How about yarn base? Do you have a yarn base that you like? Something in it?
Yeah, I tend towards either I like merino silk a lot. I like the merino cashmere nylon blends since I do use a lot of fingering weight yarn. I like those a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Okay. Frances, do you have any questions? And then we'll look at books. I saw a couple of them go by, but I couldn't see them
let's see. Jolie put in the chat box, you write the shawl pattern before you knit it?
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, I just pretty much write out what I think I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, if I need to make changes, I do. I mean, there are times when even with that one shawl where I was saying, I ended up like charting out my own thing at the end. Like sometimes it does go completely, off the rails and I start doing my own thing. There are rare occasions where I just write down as I go. And I don't know if it's just because my previous job before this was like working in a lab. So I don't know if it's just like that need to follow a procedure that I just want my pattern already made and then I just want to follow it. So yeah. And then, and then I saw you ask which charting software, but Stitch Mastery.
Yeah.
And that one, I mean, it's not cheap, but it's, I don't know, maybe around $100 or something. But what I like is that you can get your chart right out of there and get a high quality picture of it to like put into your pattern or whatever, and it'll write out the written instructions for the chart for you.
And I use Envision Knit, which is the two of them are kind of, I think one's an American creator and one's a British creator.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
it's where it goes. All right. Anything else, Frances?
Would you like to make me the host again?
Oh, I certainly can. I am so sorry. Yes, I will.
Hit all the buttons.
Yes, I will.
Yeah, and then with that, let's open it up. You guys can unmute yourselves, or I'll try to unmute you as a group while she's doing that. Once she's done that,
and while Frances is doing that, I don't think we've announced that Jen has got 6 books. We're going to walk through real quickly kind of what each book is about, and then we're going to do a random selection after we finish these questions. So one of you will get to choose which book you would like to have, and you can email Jen, and she will you will do all the coordination through Jen of that. So that will be kind of fun.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm jealous because I'd like to have a copy.
So before we get to the drawing for the book, does anybody else have a question? Anybody have anything they want to ask Jen?
Cats or dogs?
Oh, cats.
Good question.
I grew up with both, but I really love cats. My husband is so allergic. I have to remind him a lot that I'm choosing him over a cat, and that's really saying something.
That's a tough choice.
Yeah, it is a tough choice. Yeah.
Jen, I have a quick question. You said you have several books. Do you self-publish, or are you working with a publishing company?
Oh yeah. So I do have like a few little self-published ebooks like on Ravelry or online. But my actual physical books, I wrote all 6 of them with Martingale and Company. They are in Washington State, and they write or they do primarily now quilting and sewing type books. They're really not in the knitting and crochet arena anymore. So yeah, I wrote all my books with them.
Great. Anybody else have any questions? I'm going to ask one more. Okay. We had the luxury of visiting with her for a few minutes before all this started, and we were commiserating about the coronavirus and everybody being socially distanced and everybody says this is really changing the world of knitters and knitting designers. You mentioned that you teach a lot. I'd just like to ask you to reflect for a minute on the impact of this change to well, we don't know where it's going, but for the time being, all of those live teaching opportunities, live events, Stitches West, Stitches East, the Rhinebeck, everything's canceled. So what's happening now, and where do you think it's going?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you know, it's just how it is right now with everything being canceled. I mean, and it seems like at least, you know, even the ones going now into the fall, a lot of them, they're starting to sort of say, you know, that they're not going to happen or they're postponing them. You know, as a designer who also teaches, it's just been interesting. You know, there have been some opportunities for people to be teaching online. Vogue Knitting, you know, is doing their virtual events, and they're so popular that now they're doing them sort of like almost like on a monthly basis, it seems, going forward. So I think that's really helped a lot of designers and teachers to try to be able to, you know, get some income, especially some of those teachers that go to every event. I mean, you know, the ones that are always at Stitches and Vogue that are at everything. I mean, their business is really built more around teaching than probably it is designing for many of them. And so, you know, I think that that's really hard. As for me, you know, it's just a few events that, you know, have been postponed for this year, but it is interesting to like try to think about, you know, kind of how you're going to fill that gap. You know, you were sort of planning on those events happening, you know, so whether that's, you know, trying to work on more self-published designs or, you know, possibly figuring out a way to teach online, et cetera, do YouTube or something. But yeah, I think everybody's just navigating it a little bit different, just trying to figure out what's working best for them right now. I mean, I think we all are, regardless of what your job is, you know?
Yeah. Okay, good.
Okay.
Any questions? You want to move on?
Yeah, let's move on. Jen,
Okay.
do you want to walk through your books and just kind of give do each one and kind of just give a brief, you know, a brief, this one has what, you know how to do that.
Sure. All right, so this was my first book, Sock Yarn Shawls. So the title's very descriptive. It's Sock Yarn Shawls. So it's 15 patterns of shawls that use sock yarn. So there are like 5 that are the just traditional triangle shawls that just have lace on the bottom. Then there is a section that has all over lace triangle shawls here. And then the end, there's a few different shawl shapes. So this particular book did focus mostly on the triangle shape, but then there are a few other ones at the end. And then I followed that up with Sock Yarn Shawls too.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then this one does have more different shapes in it than the first one did. And it's actually split up into small, medium, and large shawls. So like basically 1 skein, 2 skein, 3 skein shawl patterns. So there's some really, really nice variety in here. Like here's a huge half pie shawl. So this one has a bunch more different shawl shapes. Then I have sock yarn accessories. I just couldn't let go of the sock yarn. And so then this one does have a couple shawls in it, but it also has socks, scarves, hats, a little bit of everything. Got some like fingerless mitts, things like that. Yeah, so this one has 20 patterns. Then I have Cozy Stash Busting Knits. So after all that sock yarn, I wrote a book that had no sock yarn in it. So this is all DK through bulky weight, and it's split up by yarn weight. So there's shawls, scarves, hats, all different kinds of things. This one has 22 patterns in it. Then I have Stunning Stitches. And so this one, I take 1 stitch pattern and designed 3 different things with it. So I'll just show you like one as an example. Here we go. It's the one that's on the cover. So this is like, it says Glarus Trio. So it's got a poncho. So it's the poncho. And so I just used the stitch pattern like along the one edge. Then I did a scarf with it where it's just sort of a couple repeats across just to make a simple scarf. And then I did a shawl where I used the pattern along the bottom. And so there's 21 patterns in here. So it's like 7 different stitch patterns. And then I used it, you know, each one in 3 patterns. And then finally, I went back to all shawls again and went to Top Down Shawls. This book is my favorite, and it's my latest one. It came out last year. So this one, obviously, it's shawls that are knit from the top down. And so it's wedge shawls, crescent shawls, and half pie shawls. But what I personally think is the best part about the book is that in the back of the book, it has design your own. Mm. And so there's a section for the wedge shawls, crescent shawls, pie shawls, and it has stitch patterns, and then there's templates where you can put in which stitch pattern you want where. So
neat.
I wanted the whole book to be like that, but they, Martingale said no. So so there's 12 patterns in there, but then the end there's this huge section where you could create like tons of different shawls with all different lace patterns. So those are my books.
Okay, cool. All right.
Varian?
I got my random generator.
You're going to draw. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask with the books, how much control do you have when you do a book? It's interesting you just said, I wanted the book to be like this, but they said
no. Yeah. So, and it obviously depends on all the different companies have, different contracts with Martingale, and I do think it's pretty standard. I was able to kind of design what I wanted, but then they were getting control over the photos, the layout, and then like with this case, we actually went back and forth about, I wanted the book to be all like templates, and they said no. Like we worked that out obviously before any contract was signed. So yeah, but when it comes to the books, it's like you do give up some control. Like if you truly want to make the book that you want to write and you want to control everything, for the most part, you're going to have to self-publish it, because any of the traditional craft book publishers, you're going to have to give up a little bit of control.
Do they tell you which yarn you have to use?
With Martingale, no, they did not. I do know that I had some friends that have written books for other publishers where, maybe if they had magazines or other things, under the brand, where then maybe they did want them to use certain yarns. But for me, they only asked that the yarn was, I had to check, which is such a weird question. I had to check with the yarn companies to make sure that the yarn was still going to be available when the book came out, which I mean, it's an important question, but you're also like, hey, yarn company, is your yarn still gonna be available in a year and a half? I mean, some of like the larger, more commercial yarns, I did actually have one company that said, actually, no, that yarn you want to use is not going to be available then. But like if you're using a smaller indie dyer, I mean, they don't know. I mean, they probably just plan on using the same yarns, but that was the only requirement they had as far as yarn went. And there were times where, like, when I would get my proof pages of the book, if I saw a photo that I was like, what the heck was that? Or, I mean, they listened to what I had to say. But like, ultimately, like with the Top Down Shawls book, they felt very strongly that they wanted to, take the picture on trees for this book, that they wanted them to be like nature-y. And I might not have personally picked that, but I mean, it's still pretty. But yeah, they're kind of deciding that. And Martingale had a photographer that's like in-house that works for them, that does photos for I think like all their books. With some other publishers, you might be able to hire somebody or get, some people will, if they get in advance, they might try to negotiate getting more so that they can hire their own photographer. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can do it. Yeah.
Now I will hit the button and it says 6.
All right. Number 6 is Jean Dunbar.
Yay!
Yay. So, Jen is going to let you have any one of those books that you would like, and we will, I will shoot you an email with her email address, and you guys can get together about which book it might be and how to get it to you. Okay, Jean? So when this is over, I'll send you an email with her contact information.
Yay.
That's great. Ladies, thank you so much for being with us today. Jen, thank you so much for your time. It was just great. It's really fun, really fun. There was another question? No? Okay. Well, you will hear from us again. And if you would not mind, we're on Instagram, Rubrics Knitting Know-How. I know you've seen it because you're all on our list, but please go back and follow us. If you aren't, pass the word on to your friends and see if we can make this community a little bit bigger.
And if you want to go back, the edited version of this will be up in the next couple of days, and it will be on our website.
Yep, we're going to take out some of the stuff, but you can go back and see how you looked on the TV. All right, ladies, thank you for your time. We'll be in touch, and be well, stay well, wash your hands. It's great to see you all.
That's from the nurse.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.